Okay, so here we go with the LG Encore from AT&T, and just first off, starting with design, one of the first things that I noticed whenever I first got the device is that it's really small. Just feels really small in the hand. The device itself is only about 4 inches by 2 inches, and then the screen is a 3-inch display. So it is pretty small, very thin, obviously no physical keyboard. But still, it feels somewhat sturdy. It does kind of feel hollow. It's very light. But again, it is a very inexpensive device, and so you're going to feel that in the design. But it is a very small device, and so this is one thing that I noticed mostly whenever I was using the keyboard. I could pretty much engulf the entire phone with my hands and then type. So if you have larger hands, it may be a little bit uncomfortable. So that's one thing to know. The device is pretty small. Again, more on the hardware. These 3 buttons down here are not actually physical buttons. You can see they're just touch-sensitive buttons. And so, sometimes the responsiveness, they weren't very responsive sometimes, but overall it was okay. And then kind of just an interesting design, kind of to add a little flair to it besides just physical buttons. And then again, this is a 3-inch display. It's a resistive touchscreen. It has a resolution of 240 by 400, but it's a resistive touchscreen, so really it's not that bad. Some people won't really like the resistive touchscreen, but it's really not that bad. The only time that it really kind of bothered me was again, going back to the keyboard. Whenever you're typing, a resistive touchscreen is fine for doing scrolling or navigating or just doing basic functions like that, but when it comes to typing, it's just not going to be the best because it's not very accurate. So if I type a quick message here, I found that I had to be kind of slow and just very determined about it. And then, even then I would still get quite a few errors a few times. Over the lazy dog. So there, I'm typing pretty slow, so I only got about 1 error. But if I were to go a little bit faster, be a little more careless, I definitely got a lot more errors. So the keyboard definitely isn't great. It's not really a messaging phone. It does have the virtual keyboard, but really you're going to have a couple of problems with it. So I wouldn't really recommend the phone if you plan on doing a lot of texting, a lot of messaging. Even though it does have the virtual keyboard, it's just not that great. Going back to messaging, it does have threaded text messaging. As you can see, it shows up in speech bubbles, and then it would be divided by the sender or whoever you sent it to. So that's kind of a nice feature. So you'll notice here on the main screen, there are 3 different screens, one for shortcuts. You can customize these. You can add or delete any shortcuts that you would like. And then there's a screen for your favorite contacts. You can have pictures here, just the default icon, and then a page for widgets. Now, I like this whole setup because it's cool that you can have widgets and then shortcuts. The only problem with the widgets page is that there's really not that many options. You can see already I have a clock, a little notepad or sticky note, and then a calendar. Other than that, there's just a couple of other clock options, a picture frame, and then the music player. So, me personally, normally I wouldn't have the calendar or a sticky note. I was just doing that for the sake of testing. Normally I would have probably just a clock, and maybe the music player, just because the options are so little. While I like having this page, there's just not very many of these options that I would actually use, but they are there, and so that may not be a problem for you. You may want to use all of those options, and then also I think it's pretty cool that the page actually scrolls, so you have a little more real estate than what it first looks like. And then having the shortcuts page is pretty cool. Going over to the menu, you'll notice a couple of features that it has. AT&T Social Net. Again, data, web browsing, it's not going to be the best. And then when it comes to social networking, just simply because the keyboard, again, wasn't that great, I wouldn't really recommend this phone if you're going to be doing a lot of that. And then you have AT&T Navigator. You'll have to pay for the data. Of course, you probably know that. MyCast Weather, Yellow Pages Mobile. There are a couple games and then the camera. So there is a dedicated camera button, which is pretty nice. You know, not every single phone has a dedicated camera button, so it's pretty nice. You also have a task manager or task menu button, so you can end any tasks that are currently running. But getting back to the camera, it's just a basic, it's a 3 megapixel camera, which is nice to have a 3 megapixel camera, but there's no autofocus or flash. So you are going to have, you know, pictures are going to be a little bit better than just, you know, with a standard basic feature phone, but they're still not going to be great. And in testing, I found basically that, you know, it was great for just quick snapshots, or if I wanted to take just a quick picture. It was fine for that, but, you know, you're not going to get the highest quality when it comes to pictures. So you can see there, you know, it's good enough for sending a picture message if you want to send someone just, you know, something that happened really quick. But I wouldn't really, it's not the best camera for, you know, taking great pictures. But, you know, for being on a basic feature phone, it's really not that bad. And I think it's probably about as good as you're going to get for this price range. You do have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. I originally thought that it was a 2.5 millimeter headphone jack, but once I tested it, it just looks small. So once I tested it, it's 3.5 millimeter. And then if we take off the battery cover, we'll look at the battery. It is a 940 milliamp hour battery, no, excuse me, 950 milliamp hour battery. And so, you know, it really wasn't too bad. Actually, with standard use, I got nearly 3 days of use with it, which is really good. And then on standby, got about 5 or 6 days. So battery life was pretty good, you know, just because it's a basic feature phone and it's not going to be doing a lot of work. I mean, not a lot of programs are going to be running, not a lot of, you know, data intensive programs are going to be running. So battery life, I'd say, was definitely excellent. The phone does have a micro SD card slot, and it supports up to 16 gigabytes of memory with an extra card. It doesn't ship with the card, so you'll have to get your own, but it supports up to 16 gigabytes. So that's pretty much it, guys. You know, it's just a standard feature phone. Like I said, you know, it doesn't have a physical keyboard, so you're going to have to use a virtual on-screen keyboard, which wasn't the greatest, and I wouldn't really recommend it if you're going to be doing a lot of messaging. But if you need a phone that just, you know, for basic functions, like maybe sending a few texts and then calling, you know, a couple of other features, the camera wasn't too bad. But if you basically just need a basic feature phone, but one that adds a little bit of style to it, then I think the Encore is great. Just the fact that it's a touchscreen phone, you know, it kind of makes it a little more fun. And then you have the UI that is very accommodating with the shortcuts and then your favorite contacts. I had a couple of problems with the screen, you know, only when I was typing, but overall, it's a decent resistive touchscreen, and build quality, you know, again, a little bit on the cheap side, but again, for the price range, I think it's pretty much what you would expect. And then you do have a great battery. So it's the LG Encore from AT&T. But anyway, thank you so much, guys, for watching. I'm Sydney. Be sure and check out PhoneDog.com for more news, updates, reviews, exclusive content, and also our Facebook page, facebook.com/PhoneDog. And then if you have any questions about this phone or about other messaging phones or just mobile tech in general, you can follow me on Twitter. My screen name is It's My Job to Know. So just follow me and send me a message, and I'll try to get back to you guys as soon as possible. But anyway, thank you so much, guys, for watching. I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com, and I'll see you guys later.